Hey guys, this is Annie Margarita Yang with Annie Yang Financial, and today I'm going to talk about setting boundaries with people. Now, the intended audience for today's video is actually not the general public on YouTube. The intended audience is actually for my future employees that I'm going to be hiring at Annie Yang Financial. However, I think this message is just so important that pretty much everybody needs to hear it, and not just the people that I end up hiring. So that's why this is okay for anybody to watch. Today, I'm going to talk about why the book Boundaries by Henry Cloud and John Townsend is going to be mandatory reading for every single new employee at Annie Yang Financial. I'm going to talk about why I think having a lack of boundaries in the workplace is just such a huge problem, and why I think it's just a cancer and a tumor if it happens in our company. I'm going to talk about the kind of results that the two employees that I already have working for me have had after reading the book. Okay, so we did a book club for the very first time, and I'm going to talk about how the book changed their lives. And then I'm going to talk about my own story on how the book changed my life the first time I read it, and how it changed my life the second time that I read it, now that I had to do the book club that we just wrapped up. And the reason I have to do this in a video format is because I don't have time to necessarily train everybody. Like, what if one day I have 100 people working for me? I don't have time to necessarily have one-on-one conversations with people about this book, but I still want you to be able to hear what I have to say about it. So that's why this is in video format, because right now, things can be very intimate and, people can hear this straight from me one-on-one. But later on, it's not necessarily going to be the same case. But I think it's so important. Everybody needs to hear straight from my mouth. So number one, why this is mandatory reading. So a few months ago, I hired my first two employees. And I told them from the very beginning, from when they started, both of them are part-time, I said to them, I think everybody needs work-life balance. You guys are working part-time. One of them works 3 hours a day, and the other is set for working 4 hours a day. I don't want you to work more than the hours you're allotted, and I don't want you to work any less. I want you to work exactly 3 hours and exactly 4 hours, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to set a timer on your phone from when you start working, and once your timer goes off, just stop working. Wrap up what you're doing, whatever you're in the middle of doing, and then just end your day. This is a fully remote company, and I want to be able to trust people that they're doing their work. I don't want to have to monitor people and, look at their screenshots and stuff like that. I'm not into that kind of stuff. I want to just be able to trust people that they're doing their work, and it's very much results-based. So I don't care how long you spent on something, I just want results. That's really what I care about. Because we're all in different time zones. My employees are like 7 or 8 hours ahead of me. One day, it's like 5 p.m. where I am, and I get an email from this employee, and it's probably like 1 a.m. where she was. She was emailing me, and she was like, hey, Annie, can you answer this question for me real quick so I can finish my work? And I'm just thinking to myself, why is she up at 1 a.m. doing work? That's not normal. I had to have a meeting with her the next day, explaining to her it's not okay to work at 1 a.m. So the thing is, the hours are flexible, right? But at the same time, I would expect you to work normal work hours. 1 a.m. is not normal. 1 a.m. is time for sleeping. I guess everyone has their own sleep schedule. Some people are night owls. I personally don't think it's healthy to work at 1 a.m. And I told her that I was very concerned for her, that she should not feel like she's compelled to work that late at night for me. Because if she keeps this up, she does this for years, one day she's gonna have this debilitating health problem that she's gonna have a hard time recovering from, because the mind-body connection is very strong. Many of the health problems that we have is actually stress-induced. I'm concerned about her future health if she's gonna keep this up. And she told me that actually I'm not the first manager that she's ever had to express that to her. Every single manager that she's had in her whole career has told her that this is a problem that she should work on. This workaholicism that she has is not okay. Even her husband has a problem with it. And I said, yeah, and I have a problem with it as well. So stop, I love the fact that you're so dedicated. I love the fact that you just are such a go-getter and you're just so ambitious and you want to help me grow my company, but I just don't love the fact that you're working this late at night. It's just not healthy. She was like, yeah, I get it. I felt like she was not convinced that this was a problem, even though I pointed out to her that it was a problem. And then the second incident was with the other employee. They were apparently chatting one day, and the other employee was asking like, hey, have you ever worked more hours than you're allotted? So this other employee is like brand new in the workforce, just graduated college, so she wasn't really sure. The first employee, I responded like, oh, I don't know. Well, I mean, sometimes I do, but maybe you should bring this issue up with Annie. So they brought it up with me. And then I was like, I don't get what the problem is, because I've said since day one to you guys to set a timer on your phone. And then once the timer goes off, you just stop working. Like, why are you guys so compelled to work more hours than you're supposed to? I never specifically said that I wanted you to work more and not get paid for it. Just do the work you're supposed to do in this time and then just stop working. You're not getting paid for the extra hours that you're working. And I don't know why, but they were just like not convinced that like I think they should just stop working. Maybe it's like this culture that other companies have. You gotta put in the extra hours. You gotta come into work early and you gotta leave late. And if you wanna get a promotion, you're going to have to work more and work longer than everyone else just to prove that you're like really loyal to the company. I'm not like that, okay? But I had a hard time convincing these people that I'm not like that. And I had a hard time getting them to change their behavior. And I have such a big problem with this. This is such a big issue for me that I wanted to like just nip in the bud. And the reason is because like if I want to keep employees working for me for the next 20 to 30 years, right? Because I need people who are like really committed and loyal to this company, and I will display the same loyalty to you, right? If I need people to stay here for 20 to 30 years, I can't have people burning out from working too much, right? I need people to be consistent, like to stay steady, like a marathon. I don't want people sprinting their way to growing a big company. It's just, I think it's gonna be a marathon. I don't think this should be a sprint, okay? I think companies that just grow way too fast, they are also so easy for them to fail. In order for something to be long lasting, it takes a long time to get there and to build versus like this startup that has like hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. They can hire a lot of people, and grow crazy fast in just 3 years. Like, I don't believe in that, okay? I think people should stay with me for like 2 to 3 decades and we're gonna grow this thing together. I can't have people burning out like that. And if these employees do what they want like this, I have an issue with that. I spoke to my friends and their managers at big corporations, and I told them, I'm having this issue with my employees. I've never been a manager before in my entire life. I don't really necessarily know how to deal with this. What is your advice, like as a manager, since you guys have managed teams before? And they didn't even see this as an issue. They were like, well, Annie, if they voluntarily want to work more hours without getting paid for it, why not? And then I was like, what? They said, yeah, this is like so normal. I said, this is not normal. This is not normal, okay? So I didn't want to listen to these guys because I was like, this is not the kind of culture I want to build. I can't force them to not work after a certain amount of hours, but I can only teach and guide. So that's what I realized. And also, I felt like I really needed to solve this problem right now while the company is still like extremely small. There's only 3 of us, right? Me and 2 other people. Because like I have 2 people who have this crazy habit of working more hours than they're supposed to and not getting paid for it. And then we hire more people, and these first 2 are more senior than everyone else. They kind of like set the precedent, right? They're kind of like the role models who are like, hey, I'm gonna show you the ropes. When people learn from you, they don't just learn from what you say. They also watch what you do. So future people who are going to come on, they're gonna watch these 2 people working for me, and they're gonna watch them work more hours than they're supposed to and not get paid for it. And they're going to feel like they're also compelled and obligated motivated to follow that kind of behavior because that's what a role model behavior should be like. That's what it takes to get recognized and praised at our company. And that's totally not what I value. So I don't want people to role model that kind of behavior because new people coming on who are just like trying to get acclimated to the culture, they're going to see that and they're going to believe like, oh, this is what I should also be doing it. And that's definitely not the case. So I needed to stop this problem right away. There's this book that I read a long time ago, a few years ago, and it was the Boundaries book. And I thought to myself, okay, maybe we could do a book club. I have never participated in a book club in my entire life. And I've never run a book club before, but I decided to try this out. Maybe this will solve the problem. Maybe we can read this book together and not just hearing it from me, but actually reading this book and discussing the book. These two employees are going to realize like why I have just such a big problem with them working more hours than they're supposed to. We had divided this book up into 8 weeks. So it was about 40 pages of reading a week, basically. And every single week, a new person was assigned as the moderator. So the moderator would come up with the discussion questions, and only the two other people who were participating were allowed to answer the discussion questions. The moderator was not allowed to give their own answers because we don't want to let anyone get led into a specific answer. So that's why the moderator doesn't answer questions. And I didn't know how this would go because the book changed my life. I came across the book when I was 22 to 23 years old, but I wasn't really sure the book would change these two people's lives. Because the way I read the book, at the time, I was struggling with boundaries with my parents. I've had boundary issues with my parents for several years. Since I was a kid, I've had boundary issues with my parents. I'm an adult now. Why do I still have this problem? I couldn't figure out why I still had this problem. And I bought this book, the Boundaries book, and I thought to myself, okay, what if I applied the things this book talked about? But I needed support. It's hard to set boundaries with people. So what I did was I went to the student health center at my husband's school. And because I was considered I'm a spouse, I get to use their services. And the graduate school there had like this sliding scale fee for therapy. So I got myself a therapist. The therapist was basically a grad student. And I told this therapist, I'm gonna do 10 sessions with her, and I'm going to read 2 chapters a session. Every time I come back into the session, I'm going to talk about what I learned in those 2 chapters. And then she would ask me how those concepts apply to my life and what I was going through. And then she would ask me what I was gonna do as part of my homework for the following 2 weeks so that I could apply what I was learning in the book. So basically, for those 20 weeks with this therapist, I applied the concepts in this book by setting boundaries with my parents. And this therapist helped me figure out what was considered a good and reasonable boundary. And she was basically my sounding board every single time I had pushback from my parents. So it changed my life because I was able to set the boundaries with my parents, but I wasn't sure if it would change these employees' lives because I'm not a therapist, okay? So I wasn't sure I was capable of doing this. So it turns out that these 2 employees, they didn't just have boundary problems with work. I had found out much later that they had boundary problems at home. So on week 7, one of them was out on holiday, right? So it was just one-on-one discussion. And on this 7th week, this employee had told me that this book had come at just the right time in her life, that it had changed her life forever. She is so grateful that we did this book club because she didn't even know she had boundary issues, and she was fixing these boundary issues in the last 7 weeks. She was so happy. Her face was just beaming. I have never seen her this happy in her entire life before. All throughout the time I was talking with her, she was so giddy and joyful. And I asked her, what's going on? What kind of issues were you having while we were reading this book? I didn't know she was having that many issues. And she told me that because she worked remotely, her siblings thought she wasn't working. Even though she was, it's still work. Just because you work from home doesn't mean you're not working. Her siblings would just tell her I need you to do this. I need you to do that, and I need you to do this. Like, they would just like randomly tell her, I need you to do this right now for me. And in the past, apparently, she would just do them. Like, she wouldn't question or anything. Like, she would just drop the work that she's doing to go do what her family wanted her to do. And of course, it was driving her crazy because she wasn't able to work on a project she wanted to work on. She wasn't able to get her work done. She ended up setting a boundary with them and saying, like, you didn't ask me for permission on whether I wanted to do this or not. I think one day her sister sent her money from overseas and told her to go to the bank to pick it up. And the sister didn't ask my employee, can you please pick it up? Like, before she sent the money. She just sent the money and just said, go to the bank and pick up the money for me. And my employee is just like, no, you didn't ask me for permission. I'm not going to do it. I don't have time. I have to get my work done. Go find someone else to go pick up the money. And it caused like a huge fight, but she was setting the boundary with her sister. And also, every time she fought with her siblings over something, the siblings would always get her mom involved. And they're adults, you know? And so her mom would end up getting involved in these sibling fights and having to mediate or whatever. And my employee, she's just such a badass. I think. She told me, like, you know what I tell my mom now? I was like, what? When I fight with my siblings, I tell my mom, you stay out of this. This is between me and my sister. And if I want you to get involved, then I'll ask you. But if I don't ask you, don't get involved. I was like, wow, you know, like that is so powerful for her to say that. I was really impressed by the kind of boundaries that she set in place. On the 8th week, I was with the other employee now. The one from the 7th week was on holiday. So now on the 8th week, I was talking one-on-one with the second employee. I asked her how the book changed her life, and she told me that she had boundaries with her husband. She and her husband apparently were fighting every 2 weeks. One of the issues was her issue with overworking, right? Working past the time that she's allotted. Her husband would complain and say, like, I'm not the most important thing in your life. Your work is the most important thing in your life. And then she would argue back, like, no, my work is not the most important thing. You're the most important thing. But after reading the book, I mean, she realized that based on her actions did say that her work was the number one priority in her life and not her husband. And once she realized that, she decided to set boundaries with herself. And if her husband asked her to come eat dinner because he made food, she would say, 10 minutes, let me wrap up what I'm doing and I'll be right there in 10 minutes. And she would actually stop her work and she would go in the 10-minute mark that she said. She told me that this book was the best book she ever read. She told me she's read many books in her life and she's always heard the quote that a book can change your life, but she never knew a book can change her life like this. And then I was like, you know, every single book that you read can change your life, but I think the problem is many people can read the same book, the Boundaries book, but it won't change their life. And I think the issue isn't the book. I think the issue is how people approach reading the book. Because if you take a look at the reviews for this book on Amazon, all of the negative reviews were harping on the fact that it has a lot of like Christian references to the Bible and stories in the Bible, and it's just too religious for them. And what's it matter that the book is too religious? The content is excellent. The stories are very relatable. It doesn't matter if it's Christian or not because it's about the principles and the ideas. If you're able to take the principles and the ideas and you're able to implement it in your own life, you're going to change your life. If you read something and you just immediately write it off as being too religious for you, then you're not going to get anything out of the book. It's an excellent book, but I think it's all in how you read it. I honestly told her, if you had read this book on your own, without the two of us here to have these discussions on like what we're struggling with in our life and how we were dealing with it, what do you think would have happened? She's like, nothing. I would have just read the book, would have just forgotten about it. I said, exactly. She said the fact that we read it together and we were able to discuss our issues. And she said, hearing me talk about my own story about the first time I read it and how I was able to set boundaries with my parents is what gave her the strength and courage to say, you know what, if Annie can do it, then I can do it as well. So she's actually the one who encouraged me to make this video because I was like, well, I'm never gonna do this book club again because it's like very time consuming. I'll do the book club, but not the same book. I'm not gonna have every new employee read the same book and we're gonna do a group huddle. And it's just not a good, efficient use of our time. But the thing is, she found strength in hearing me share my story. So she feels like if I don't share my story and have other people hear it, then it's not gonna have the same effectiveness. So here I am. I'm gonna share with you guys my story. I've always been told it's not professional to share and air the dirty laundry of my personal life, especially the kind of issues that I've had with my parents. Like, my husband has always told me that it's not nice to complain about my parents in public. I apologize, but the past is the past. The past has happened. There's nothing I can change about the past, so I can talk about the past and move on from it and focus on my future. So I'll share with you guys 3 stories that I think were the most helpful for my employees to hear during our book club. The first one is about how my parents were always comparing me to other people. I mean, it's a very common thing for Asian parents to do, apparently, but I didn't sit very well with being compared all the time to other people. This has started probably since I was at least 10 years old. I would get very high grades in school since I was very young. I would come home, I would show my parents what I got on a test or what I got on my report cards. And the response was always, well, what did Diane get? What did Judy get? What did Cindy get? How well did you do compared to Jackie? And it was just like, what about the fact that I already did really well on its own? Why is it that everything I do needs to be compared to my friends? And it really soured the relationships and perspectives I had about my friends, because instead of being just friends with my friends and having a good time, in the back of my mind, subconsciously, with all the drilling that my parents did in my head, right, growing up, it was like, well, what did that person get? It's almost like they're my friends, but I'm also competing against my own friends for some stupid, I don't know, theoretical bar. So it ruined that kind of innocence, that I wish I had with my friends, because to this day, I'm 27 years old now, in the back of my mind, I still wonder, what is Judy doing with her life right now? I wonder how much Diane is making as a physician assistant. Let me check on what Sydney's doing on her LinkedIn. What's Jackie doing? I wonder what he's doing. Let me go text him and see what they're doing in the career. Even though we're not that close anymore, we've grown apart, in the back of my mind, I'm still comparing how my career is doing compared to their careers, when I honestly, consciously don't care. It's all throughout I was growing up. And my parents would especially compare me to my own sister. So I'm 6 years older than my sister. And so during my middle school years, my parents are basically comparing me to my sister who's in kindergarten and first grade. And so my parents would be like, well, why can't you be more well-behaved like Jenny? It was always like, look at how quiet Jenny is, because I'm a really outspoken person. Look at how nice she is. Look at how she just keeps to herself instead of wanting to go out with her friends all the time. Look at how great she is. It's always this comparison, and it just never stops. I would complain to my parents, it's really hurting my self-esteem what you're doing to me. They wouldn't listen. They're like, oh yeah, well, this is good for you. And you would think that this would stop when you're 18 and you're an adult, you're now your own person, but it doesn't stop, because this one instance in particular stands out to me is when I was 20. I joined Toastmasters because I wanted to learn public speaking, and I would record my speeches because I wanted to watch my speech and look for the things that I did that could be improved on, so then I can implement those changes in my next speech. On my 7th speech, I was so proud of my 7th speech. I gave a speech about why women take so long in the bathroom, and the speech was so funny that everyone in the room that watched the speech was cracking up. Like, they just couldn't stop laughing. It was like, ah, like bursting with laughter from everybody as I was giving the speech. Every time we do these meetings at Toastmasters, they vote on the best speaker of the night. And that night, I won the best speaker. I got a ribbon, and I was so proud of myself because I was able to make people laugh, so I entertained them. I had the body language. I got dressed up for this. I had vocal variety, right? So I practiced all the different aspects of public speaking, and I was able to successfully incorporate it into the speech, and I won the best speaker of the night. That was like one of the most proudest things I've ever done, because sure, like anybody can do like really well on a math test if you study hard enough, but public speaking was something like I was always very shy. So public speaking was something that I always thought like I can't do. So when I was able to do that night, I was like, oh my gosh, I can do it. Like I was so proud of myself. And I went home and I told my parents I got the ribbon, and they wanted to watch the speech. And so they looked at the speech, and immediately they're like, oh my God, this is terrible. Look at how you're standing. You're standing with your feet shoulder width apart. Which, by the way, like is what the professional recommended advice is for public speaking. Like that's a power stance, to stand with your feet shoulder width apart. The way you stand is so ugly. You don't stand like Hillary Clinton. Look at Hillary Clinton when she's giving her speech and doing these debates. She stands with her feet close together like this, more feminine, more ladylike. You should be standing more like a lady. This is not a good speech at all. And then I was like, but Mom, Dad, what about the content of the speech? Like, isn't it funny? The point is, I was able to connect with people. No. This speech is not good. You're never going to be a good public speaker like Hillary Clinton. And then I was like, why are you comparing me to Hillary Clinton? Hillary Clinton is like really old, like she's at the end of her career. I'm 20 years old. I literally just started my career. Why am I getting compared to someone like this? I was so upset that night. I went from being like this high to this low for days. I was so upset by what they said, by their comparison. And even though they know I hate the comparison, they just wouldn't stop. And it just kept happening over and over again as an adult. Like, for example, at that time in my life, I was working minimum wage jobs because I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to work those jobs, save us some money, figure it out. And my mom would talk about how her friend's son was working on Wall Street making $100,000 a year, and how he had just bought his own condo in Manhattan or something like that. It was always like something about someone else making a whole lot of money. And why can't I be like that person? Why can't I make $100,000 just like that person's son? And then I was like, well, how old is that person? Like, how old is this person making $100,000 a year? Oh, he's 30 years old. I'm like, yeah, he makes that much money because he's 30 years old, Mom. I'm 21 years old. I literally just started my career. Do you expect me to be 21 years old and make $100,000 a year? You don't just do that. It takes years to get there. She just wasn't listening. And finally, I moved out of the house. I moved all the way to Texas. I'm 2,000 miles away from my parents' house. Even though I am physically 2,000 miles away, somehow they're able to still push my button and trigger me and make me just as upset every time they talk to me, just like when I lived with them. I was like, this is ridiculous. I moved this far away and I'm still bothered by what my parents say. And I can't get them to stop comparing me to other people. I worked with that therapist that I'm talking about, and we set a boundary. I read the book, and it talked about how when you set boundaries with people, you're going to get a lot of pushback. So I was getting ready for that, but I needed a lot of support from my therapist for this, because I got a lot of pushback, not just from my parents, but from every single person in my life who was telling me that I was wrong for setting my boundaries with my parents. Because my parents gave birth to me, they raised me, they fed me, and all these things, they put all this money into me, and therefore it's disrespectful for me to set boundaries with my parents. But honestly, if you have someone in your life who's a total stranger, let's say a total stranger just walked up to me after I gave a speech that day and just said, your speech was terrible. You don't stand like Hillary Clinton. And the way you stand is just so unfeminine and unladylike. What? You wouldn't accept that from a stranger. So just because someone is your mom or dad, it's okay for them to talk to you like that? Like, it's not okay for anybody to talk to you like that. You teach people how to treat you. You don't let people do that to you. The boundary that I set is, if Mom and Dad, if you talk to me about my career, okay, this topic here, that's the sticking point. If you talk to me about my career, I will hang up the phone. I was never the one who brought my career up with my parents whenever we spoke. They always somehow transitioned the topic into, Oh, how's your career going? Oh, how's work? Oh, what are you doing with your career? Oh, what are your dreams? They would always pivot into that conversation. And then when I gave an answer, my honest, authentic answer to that question then transitioned into, well, so-and-so is making this much money, why can't you? As if something's wrong with what I was doing. That was the first thing. Not if they started comparing with me. If they started talking about my career, right at that point, goodbye, mom. Call back another day. But also, like, if they just started comparing me in any other way, not my career, it's also goodbye. Call back another day. I'm not gonna talk to you. Just two things. No career, no comparisons. I had already told them before I set this boundary, I said to them, this is the boundary I'm setting with you. This is what I'm gonna do if you start talking about these two things. And they totally ignored it, even though I told them this is the boundary. So, of course, they started calling and talking about these things. I said, hey, thank you for showing your concern. I have to go now. I don't want to talk about this stuff. Next time you call back with something else to talk about. And by the way, the time limit is like I said to them, if they call back again the next day, I'm not going to pick up. They're going to have to wait 7 days to call back before they can talk to me. Because they just kept doing it for a year. It was a whole thing, right? I didn't want to talk to my parents. I think at first I went 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, or something like that. No, absolutely no contact before I set the boundary. So I went fully no contact with my parents, and then I had set the boundary, and then that boundary was starting to teach them how they were allowed to talk to me. So then after a whole year, they finally realized, oh, if I talk to Annie about these issues, she's going to hang up. I just won't talk about them anymore. So my parents ended up finding other things to talk about, and now we can talk. But it took them a whole year to stop comparing me to other people. It was ridiculous, but it worked. But all throughout when I was setting this boundary with people, I had friends who are watching me do this. They're like, why can't you be nice to your mom? Your mom raised you. Your mom loves you. Your mom took care of you for the first 18 years of your life. She gave birth to you. You came out of her own body. Think of all the pain that she went through in going through labor just to give birth to you. How could you do that to your mom? She loves you so much. And then I was just like, yeah, but I need to take care of myself. If my mom and my dad just keep talking this way to me, and every time they talk to me like this, I end up feeling like shit, and I end up for 2 days so unproductive in my life because I'm mulling over the fact of they said this, I can't believe they said that, and I go into the spiral where in my head I'm just ruminating over the things that they said, and I'm just so angry that they said it to me. How am I going to make a great contribution to society if that's what my mind is focused on for 2 days straight every time they spoke to me? And they do this to me every single week that they talk to me. I'm not gonna be a very good productive worker in society. I think we need to take care of ourselves first before we can take care of other people. I just didn't allow my parents to ruin my mood anymore. So that's the first story. The second story is about the time when I was a teenager. I bring this up not necessarily because of boundaries, but in the book you're going to read, when you start setting boundaries with people and you get backlash as a consequence of setting boundaries with people, because people are going to get really angry with you when you set boundaries with them, and when they get really angry with you, they're going to make you pay in some way. And in the book, one of the things is there is this son who had a lot of financial benefits from his father. His father would pay for their vacations and pay for this and pay for that for the son, the wife, and the kids. And the son wanted to set boundaries with the father because the father, in return, in expectation of all the things that the father had paid for, was expected to do certain things in return. But the son didn't want to do those things, and the son wanted to set the boundary. And the son knew that part of setting the boundary would mean a consequence would be he would no longer get any financial gifts at all. In fact, I think in the story, it talked about how the father ended up cutting him off the will. It got so bad, the father just removed him from the will. I bring this story up because you are going to experience those kinds of backlash from people, but you need to develop the courage and the strength to deal with them. And I had dealt with this one in particular really young because when I was 14, I started dating this boy who had brown skin. And my parents, you would say they're not racist, but they were not okay with me dating a person with brown skin. I would think that's racist. They were like, we're not racist, we are okay with black, brown people, just not you dating black, brown people. We don't want to have a black, brown baby in the future or something like that. Anyway, they freaked out. I refused to break up with this boy. I really loved this boy. He made me really happy because I was always getting compared to by my parents. This one guy, he loved me just as I was. He didn't feel like I needed to change. That's why I was really happy with him. So in response to me not breaking up with this guy, my parents took away my cell phone and they would say really mean things to me every single night. They would say things like, "You're not our real daughter, you were adopted. If you don't break up with him, we're going to kick you out of the house and you're going to live on the streets." And that one in particular, I responded to them by saying that, well, that's considered abandonment. You're threatening abandonment to kick me out on the street, and that's against the law. So I actually called Child Protection Services on my parents, and so I got CPS involved in our family for an entire year. And I ended up having to go to the CPS counselor every single week after school. We were supposed to have family therapy together, but my parents were always just saying, "We're not the problem, we're perfect. She's the problem here. She's 100% the problem in our family." I ended up having to go to counseling alone by myself, which didn't help. They also just started to refuse to pay for stuff. I was 14, so they would pay for the basic necessities of living. Anything extra, like if I wanted to go out with friends, they didn't pay for it. I got an allowance every week. I had to wash the dishes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week, so that's 21 meals. And I got an allowance of $20 a week. So you can imagine, in a month as a teenager, I was earning $80. But they took away my cell phone, and they wouldn't pay for a cell phone bill either. My boyfriend's brother had given me his cell phone. When he changed cell phones, then he gave me his old one. So I got that one for free, but I still needed to pay the phone bill. Back then, this was over 10 years ago, we didn't have unlimited plans as cheap as they are today. Back then, you had a certain number of minutes that you had to buy and a certain number of texts, and you paid per minute or paid per text until you ran out. So I would buy 100 minutes. I used my allowance for that. Also, back then, because my mom had already stopped menstruating, I was the only one menstruating in the house. My sister, still in elementary school, did not menstruate yet. So I actually had to buy my own menstrual pads since I was 14 years old. It was a lot for me because menstrual pads are really expensive. And so every time my parents also called me on my phone that I paid for, I didn't pick up because I was like, well, I paid for this. And every time you call me, you're using up something that I paid for. It's not unlimited, so I just wouldn't pick up. They basically threatened me financially to get what they want, but I refused to give in. I could have just said, yeah, I want my phone back, so I'll break up with this boy, but I didn't. I really did not want to be financially reliant on my parents. So one of the things that we had a fight about that they threatened me is they said, if you don't break up with this boy, 14 years old, we're not going to pay for college. As if that was a huge threat over me. I basically just responded, if you're not going to pay for college, then I'm just not going to go. I don't need to go to college. I don't need you to pay for me to go to college. I don't need your money. And I don't want your money. Every single Christmas, every single birthday since I was 14 years old, where my parents offered me to buy me a gift or give me money, I have turned all of them down. I have not accepted any Christmas or birthday gifts from my parents since I was 14 years old. Because I know for a fact that just from the way that they spoke to me when I was 13, we bought you a $500 guitar, so therefore, you need to do this for us. We pay $40 an hour for your guitar lessons. So therefore, you need to be a good child and do this for us in return. So I can only imagine, if I took my parents' money for college, they would have said, well, we're paying for your college, and therefore, this is the college you should be going to. And this is the major you should be going to. And this is the career path you should be going into. I already knew, like, if I take that money, my parents would determine my career for me. So I refuse to ever take any money from them because my life is mine. You need to have the courage to stand for yourself and find your own way to make your own money. Whatever it is, it might not necessarily be a financial consequence from the people around you when you set those boundaries. It could be a different kind of consequence, but you basically have to be ready to let the relationship go. You have to be ready to lose any money and so forth. That's why I'm sharing with you my second story. And then the third story is actually from the second time I read this, which is during the book club. So, I mean, you can still gain insights when you read things a second time. I mean, I'm reading this book now like 5-6 years later, right? So my life is in a different place now. The kind of boundary issues I have with people are actually with clients. People somehow think that because they're paying me money, that they get all of my time. They think, oh, because, well, I'm paying her this much money, I should be able to just call her and email her, and she should pick up right away. And if I email her, she should email me back within 10 minutes. And if she doesn't email me back in 10 minutes, and she's not doing a good job, and this is terrible service. Some people actually believe that. I actually had one person email me, it's this is an emergency, but email me back right away, you know? I'm working, I have multiple things going on. I can't email you back. I can email you back tomorrow about this. No, we need to solve this now. These clients, they expect me to just drop what I'm doing and just cater to them. And I realized, I have a real boundary issue with these people, and I had to set the boundary. What I did was on Thursdays, actually, I have my piano lessons. And I don't do any work on Thursdays. I block out the entire day with no work just so that my piano teacher, if she needs to be able to schedule the lesson to be earlier or later because something changed in her day, I would be able to say yes, and I would never miss a single lesson because I blocked off Thursday just for her. When clients email me on Thursdays and I don't email them back the same day, they get anxious, right? So I just basically had to set this auto response to go off every single Thursday that said, I'm in piano lesson right now. I am not going to answer your email. I will check your email tomorrow. I do not check email at all on Thursdays. Thank you for understanding and respecting this boundary. I set that one first, right? Thursdays. Okay. And then the next one was I totally removed email notifications from my phone. I don't check emails from my phone anymore. All I do is when I'm working on a computer, I'm working. If I'm on my phone, there's no way I can work from my phone either, because if an email comes in and my client's like, can you check on this? Can you work on this? What's the point? If I'm on my phone and I see this email, what kind of work can I do when I'm in my living room? I'm on my phone. I'm at the grocery store. I get this email and it just pings me about this work. What can I do about it? I can't do anything about this issue because I need to get on a computer to actually do it. So I decided, this is really unproductive and it's not a good boundary. There's actually no boundaries, right? So I had to set a new boundary for myself where I'm only going to do work. I'm only going to respond to emails and check emails when I'm actually on the computer, and my actual work hours are going to be this. I had to set very specific work hours. And slowly in the last 8 weeks, clients have gotten more used to having slower email response times from me. They used to get emails from me at midnight because I would check my email at midnight. Sometimes they would get emails from me at 7 a.m. in the morning. I would always try to respond back to emails within 2 hours, and I don't do that anymore. And the first time, I think the first week I was implementing this, where I was responding to emails slowly because I only do it when I'm on a computer. There's this guy who emailed me in the morning. He's used to getting emails back from me the same day. By the end of the evening, he was like, Annie, did you get my email? And then I had to email him the next day and said, yes, I got your email. I'll work on it later. After that moment, he got used to it. I guess everybody got used to it. Nobody bothered me anymore about not responding to their email the same day. Now it's kind of oh, we could just wait 2 or 3 days. It's okay. We know for a fact Annie will get the work done. We just won't hear from her the same day. So it changed my life because I was having a lot of health problems, and one of the things was from this lack of boundaries with my work. I would work until 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Then I would eat my dinner at 9 o'clock. Then at 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, midnight, I would practice piano. So I basically had very little work-life balance, but now I have a lot more work-life balance. There's this belief that to have your own company and to successfully grow it, you're going to have to work these long hours. You're not going to have any life outside of work. And I was like really buying into that. I was really ready and I was like, I'm gonna be really gung-ho about this. I'm gonna do it. But I had realized it came with the detriment of my health. And I think it's possible to have work-life balance and to be extremely productive and to be able to grow a company and do all of that. Like, you don't need to work 60, 70-hour work weeks. I think it's very much possible if you come with the right mindset. That's the third story on how the Boundaries book changed my life. I think that's everything you guys needed to hear. So I really hope you enjoy reading this book as much as all of us have. And I really hope that you're able to implement into not just your work life, but also into your personal life. And hopefully it'll also be one of the best books you also read. That's it for now, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.